I'm Dr. Logan Noone, psych resident, alongside my other psych resident colleague, Dr. Joon Chun. All right, Dr. Chun, have you ever heard of the suicide bill?
No. What is that? Fill me in, Logan. What's
All
going
right.
on?
So it's kind of this concept, the suicide belt in the middle of the country. The states that are at the highest elevation seem to also have the highest suicide rates. It's
Highest
scary.
elevation. That's interesting.
Yeah. And is it because of the elevation? Is it because of the culture of ski towns? Who goes there? Who is attracted there? The partying of ski towns? Who really knows? Let's get into some facts though. The national suicide rate, and these are a little bit old, but it doesn't exactly matter because this isn't a new trend. This has been going on for a while. The national average of suicide is 13.3 suicides per 100,000 people, and this is from 2015. Now, in comparison, the Colorado suicide rate was nearly 20, Idaho 22, Utah 22, New Mexico 23, Montana 25, Alaska 26, Wyoming 28, a better word, of higher suicide completion in ski towns. You know, I absolutely love skiing, and I didn't really realize this till recently. But I really want to kind of get into some of the theories around why potentially this is occurring. And then maybe, we're both psychiatry physicians over here in residency. Give our 2 cents on how people can get better. Before I get into theories I seem to understand, do you have any theories onto why the suicide belt exists?
No, I'm trying to think about it in my head right now, but it really makes no sense to me because one of the things I thought about was economics, right? Low economic status usually leads to worse mental health outcomes, but you have states like Colorado in there and even Wyoming. And certainly there are pockets of poverty, but there's also pockets, especially like in these ski resort communities. These are areas of extremely high affluence. So I really do wonder what's causing it. And a question I have for you before you get into your spiel is: Are these numbers looking at residents that are living in that town, or does it include people that are coming out of out of town for vacation and seasonal residents essentially?
Right. That is an excellent question. And no, at least those stats don't go into the necessary specifics. What you said at the end here, I think, is two very different things. People who go into the town seasonally, and then people who go into there as vacation is, I think, two radically different groups.
Really?
First, let's break it down. Okay, so there is huge income disparities in these ski town areas, but I would not call them affluent. I think that's a false understanding. I obviously need to take you skiing or snowboarding, June. Take your pick, because I used to be an instructor. We will go this year before we graduate residency. But, it's weird. When you drive up to the ski resort towns, I get where that idea of, oh my God, this is such an affluent area. Okay, let's talk about Aspen. Aspen, everyone's heard of Aspen. Please go watch Dumb and Dumber.
Money, that's what I think of when I hear Aspen.
Right. Average median home in Aspen is, this article is quoting 836,000. I actually don't even know what year that's from. That even seems low to me in 2023,
Yeah.
but it's different than that. But when this article was written, sorry listeners, I don't know, the average estimated per capita income was $58,000. So these aren't exactly affluent areas. There are people who have great affluence and great capital that go there. They own the $1 million houses that, of course, are right next to the resort. I'm not saying those people don't exist. At the end of the day, they are still the minorities. The other people that work in those towns, a lot of those jobs are, of course, close to the tourism industry, maybe seasonal workers, or other just kind of normal jobs that a town needs to survive, aren't necessarily in that same affluent category group. So there are huge income disparities in these towns. A lot of the individuals that go there for seasonal work at these ski resorts, they pay like shit. Near minimum wage jobs. They are not adequately compensated. Then the pricing of housing is very challenging as well too. Typically, they're living in these apartments or these facilities that are not the best. A lot of these employees of ski resorts towns typically work 2 to 3 jobs just to make ends meet. It's also very interesting because these ski resort towns go through economic cycles. Think of Truckee, Lake Tahoe area. Have you ever been out there?
No.
It's beautiful. It is. It was. I used to live in Sacramento. I used to go skiing all the time in the Lake Tahoe Valley. It was absolutely incredible. Now they have a pretty amazing mountain biking culture in the summertime too. But a lot of those tourism and that money that comes into the town subsides come spring. The ski resorts shut down. They don't have as much snow. There's not as much jobs, not as much work. Very interestingly, that's also when a lot of these suicides occur.
Oh,
So
wow.
while
Okay.
a lot of them come in the spring, and there's two reasons for that. One is maybe economical, um, and so maybe that's also feeding into these stats. I wish I had the data of who exactly is killing themselves, but that's very hard to measure. Perhaps it's an economic drive. Also, in this article was talking about how, look, these ski resort towns, how many of these individuals maybe live with seasonal affect disorder? And if you don't know what that is, your mood gets a little bit worse in the wintertime, long story short, right? Now, these ski resorts towns are at extremely high elevation. The winters are tough. There are literally such intense storms that might be measured in feet, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8 feet sometimes. You literally have to hunker down. And so what I was talking about also is how sometimes these individuals, okay, I am experiencing winter. I'm used to this. I've always had seasonal affect disorder. I feel like shit. Come this spring, when that warm sun finally comes out, when I finally can get outside a little bit more, I'll feel better. Come spring, sunshine comes, my mood is still shit. Kind of this like sunshine paradise paradox in a sense.
Right, but then if we're attributing this to a seasonal affective disorder, shouldn't we see the number of suicide attempts and completed suicides drop when the winter fades away and you start to get more sunlight? But you're saying that during the spring, that's the especially tough time of the year for them.
Right. At least it's we're kind of theorizing, right? Like
Right.
maybe why are there more suicides in the spring? And what this one our article was talking a lot about, it's maybe how because you anticipate that this depression is all because of a seasonal affect, and once it comes spring, everything's gonna feel better. But come spring, ooh, I don't actually feel that better. Wow, I don't actually have that job because now the ski resort is closing down come May. Things are really tough. Also contributing to these ski towns, their isolation, right? We even talked about
Hmm.
if a hardcore snowstorm comes in, you're not really leaving your house during those tough times. Now after that tough time, that big storm, you hopefully you're going out enjoying the pow. One of the most amazing experiences in the world, experiencing powder skiing. I've never really gone powder snowboarding, I must be honest. Powder skiing, incredible, life changing. But contributing to this social isolation is this social volatility as well. We talked about seasonal affect or seasonal workers before, excuse me. Okay. A lot of people will move in perhaps for a season, perhaps even for a year or two. But look, a lot of these ski towns are tough to permanently live in. Why do I mean that? Lack of jobs, lack of schools, and lack of resources to specialist doctors, right? Like finding a cardiologist out in Aspen is probably a lot harder than it is finding someone in right downtown Denver. So what these articles have also identified is this social volatility. Like you form a good connection with someone one year and then they move out the next year. So there are so many individuals who are isolated in these communities who have a difficult time forming really long-term meaningful friendships in a sense. Not saying it doesn't happen, but it can be a challenge.
Right, right, right. And maybe these ski resorts are a good microcosm of some of the bigger social issues that we're seeing in our communities all over the country that's leading to some of the abysmal mental health outcomes that we're having. So, for example, you touched upon the loss of community, right? In these ski towns, it seems like it's transient. During the winter, there's an influx of people, you have people to hang out with, and then springtime, they're all gone.
Yeah.
Um, but if you project that out to the rest of the country, like look at what's happened to our, especially small town communities in the past several decades, right? This is a problem that's going on all over the country, and it's been happening for decades now. The lack of attendance in church, the lack of civil service participation, the lack of individual community groups have all disintegrated. I mean, we have social media today. We're more connected than ever, supposedly. However, all those relationships are superficial. And I think the mismatch of expecting to have a community, but the reality of the fact that it's extremely difficult to attain, that mismatch of expectations and the reality causes a lot of distress for people. And It's funny to hear you talk about ski town resorts in this way, Logan, because I think, like it just highlights that these places, it can mean so many different things to so many different people. Like here you are saying that powder skiing is like this incredible experience. And of course, when we think of ski resorts, right, it's a positive energy that we're feeling, a lot of positive thoughts. But undeniably, for a lot of people in our country today, those towns represent a big source of pain and suffering to the point that they're having thoughts of wanting to self-harm. And once again, speaking further on that fact, it's also another microcosm of the economic challenges that we're facing as a society. I remember that I was watching this video about, I think it was Jackson Hole, Wyoming, right? One
Mm-hmm.
of these places, ski town resort, right, right by Yellowstone National Park, highly coveted area within our country, especially for the most affluent of our citizens. And what this video was talking about with COVID and everything is there is just a more demand for these properties,
Yeah.
to the point where they're worth millions and millions of dollars. The people that have been residing in these towns have essentially been priced out. And again,
Right.
we see corollaries in some of our bigger cities, right? New York City, San Francisco. These are issues that are happening. So it's interesting to look at these ski resorts, and I see a microcosm of the bigger issues that's affecting the entirety of our country.
Right. I'm really glad you brought that up, June, because at the beginning of this clip, I was talking about how those suicide rates I read out were way before the pandemic. That was 2015 or 2016. So I think you're right. I think, the COVID experience that we all lived through put gasoline on this fire that's already burning out of control. You know, Another thing that I think really contributes to the suicide belt is men. We talk a lot about on this show men's particular unique mental health challenges. So I used to kind of be a ski bum in college. I guess I still am sort of this kind of grown up sort of ski bum, right? We used to always joke, we would go to these parties in these ski towns when I was in college, mostly dudes. A lot of these individuals who do live in ski towns at the end of the day and take these kind of employment so they can ski a lot and snowboard a lot are men at the end of the day. Men statistically more likely to engage in completing suicide. And why is that? Access to firearms. A lot of these communities up in these mountain towns, it's just part of the culture, hunting, right? Access to firearms and firearms in general is just embedded in the culture. Also, related to men, in a sense, is substance use, right? Men have a particular increased risk of engaging in substances, and these ski resorts towns are party towns. People are partying all the time, So Mental Health America estimates that like half of all suicides were related to some kind of substance use issue at the time, and so I think that's a huge contributing factor into this as well too. This party culture, people using substances, and then maybe they don't feel so good, and you know, oops. So
Right, right.
you also brought up one other thing that I thought is interesting. I mentioned this earlier, kind of like this paradise paradox. It was called paradise paradox, and yeah, imagine one of the best ski days of my life. I was up at Mount Baker in Washington, and it had just snowed, no joke, 5 feet. POW skiing. I'm on these skis that look like water skis. They're so fat. It was incredible. I will never ever forget that experience. Now, I watched this movie that I want to encourage. If you have made it this far into this episode, please go check out The Mountain in My Mind. It's a free movie on YouTube, and it really highlights this issue that we're talking about today: mental health in ski resort towns. Talked about the one individual who made this movie. His younger brother committed suicide, and it was either that same day or perhaps the day before. He was out on the mountain skiing and like having his time. Like I think these kind of issues can be so hidden because people can still perhaps engage in the enjoyable activities, and maybe when they go. Also, this kind of paradise paradox talks a lot about how like when you're surrounded in paradise, you're surrounded in one of the most beautiful mountains in the world, and you don't feel good, it can make you feel even worse. Like, wow, like, why am I not feeling good? I'm surrounded by this beauty and I still feel like shit. I feel even more down on myself. I don't deserve this life. Spiral, spiral.
Yeah, Logan, I think one of the, that just reminds me, one of the best ways I think we can safeguard our mental health is an attitude of gratefulness and being thankful. And what you were talking about with, being in this beautiful environment and still not feeling that connection, still not being able to be in awe of the beauty that surrounds you. Yeah, man, that can really have a negative effect on your mental health. One of the things when I work with patients is I'm just like, hey, like when you go for a drive, like look at, it's fall right now. We just had Thanksgiving.
Just
Look at
look
the
out
look
the
at the
window the whole time you're
yeah.
driving.
Look at how the leaves are changing and say, wow, that's incredibly beautiful. How about when the sun is out, right? It's a sunny day, another day to get something accomplished. I think it's like, taking gratefulness in the small things in life, and we need to be reminded more of that. And the funny thing about depression is that it changes our ability to be appreciative of some of these small things in our life, right? As the old saying goes, when you're depressed, everything seems catastrophic. You tend to over exaggerate some of the negative qualities about yourself, and you underplay some of the positive qualities about yourself. So maybe this is a case of something similar that's going on, where people are already in a state of depression. They kind of come out to the ski resorts and they're like, oh, maybe this is the answer. This is the answer that I've been searching for. And when they don't get the goals, the results that they were expecting, there's again a sense of disappointment that can further contribute to that depression. Logan, one of the things that I wanted to bring up was how about the fact that men are more goal oriented? And what I mean by that is, right, in the middle of the winter, you can show up to these ski resorts, with that goal in mind, right? Okay, this winter, I'm going to work my ass off and I'm going to, like, I don't know, run how to grind the rails on a snowboard. I'm not sure if that's the right terminology, but you
No,
get the
yeah,
point.
no,
Yeah.
that actually
Yeah.
was good job.
You
No, yeah.
start setting goals for yourself. And I think that's a very understated part of our mental well being, right? We need to all have a core relationship with the world. Like, what is your purpose? What are you good for? What kind of positive energy are you putting out there into your community? And when you have these goals that you're chasing, whether it be career related or sports related, that's essentially a distraction. It can help you to have a sense of purpose in this life, and also to measure a sense of progress that you're seeing on a day to day basis, which can be tremendously helpful for your mental health. And I imagine what happens when spring rolls around and you're just kind of like, oh crap, like, I was finally making some progress. And now for like the next 6 months, I don't have this thing that anymore, this thing that I'm very passionate about. And again, that there's a sense of loss. And I'd imagine that sort of dynamic also can potentially contribute to what we're seeing.
Huh, interesting. Yeah, I guess I've never thought of it that way. I guess I didn't really know what you meant by like men are more oriented. I mean, I would argue certain men. I don't know. That's a topic for a different episode, I think, to dive into. But you know, I think it's perhaps, but I also think really maybe that's a young man's or young person's. I put my foot in my mouth here. Approach to skiing because at this age, 34. I mean, look, I'm trying to be realistic in my remainder of my athletic career in respect to skiing. I think it's going to decline, right? So that those goals that I might have set for myself when I was a younger skier have definitely evolved and changed. My goal really now when I set out skiing is let's not get hurt today. Whereas when I was younger, I feel like I didn't have a fully developed frontal portion of my brain, right? And my goal for the season was to land this trick or take off this big of a cliff, right? It definitely was different. So I definitely think that can be a part of it. And what I really wish I could extrapolate from these suicide rates, and maybe we do a follow-up episode on this, is are these suicides that we're seeing in these the suicide belt, is this mostly young people, or is this more older individuals who maybe perhaps have more economic demands, or they realize, oh, I am way behind other colleagues who took a more traditional path and lived closer to the city, and I'm over here barely making ends meet, living in the ski town and arguably having more fun, but now I have this broken body. What did the injuries contribute to all of this? So I'm not really sure. I did like how you brought up kind of that cognitive behavioral technique, right? Like that mindfulness practice that I agree with so much. If you're dealing with any of these depression issues, I think that's a wonderful, wonderful technique to try to implement into your life. What I would also piggyback on that is, we had one of our most downloaded episodes was we had our friend on, Will. Can't even remember that guy's last name. We'll have to tag it in
Summers,
the thing.
Dr. Will Summers.
Will Summers.
Yeah.
Nice. There we go. Good job. And he talked about acceptance and commitment therapy. And that's what I would really try to teach that individual who hopefully is listening to this podcast, who maybe lives in, like Salt Lake City, Utah, or Solitude, Alta, Utah, or something, some amazing, beautiful place, Jackson Hole, but they're dealing with some extreme depression. I would try to teach them acceptance and commitment therapy quickly, right? Like, you need to accept that distress, unhappiness, frustration, you could argue, I would even say depression, is part of the human experience. So, even if you're living in San Diego or Hawaii or Bali, these paradise locations, there are going to be experiences of depression in your life, no matter what. That same person who lives in Iowa or someplace, maybe not the best climate, most beautiful, picturesque place, is also going to experience elements of depression. This is just part of the human experience, and we all need to collectively learn how to live with those depression features in our life, right? So that's what I would try to teach that person. Now, I want to end on this, June. We have been rambling for about 20 minutes here. I could talk all day about skiing, but let's wrap it up. So there's actually some science around this that they're theorizing. We don't really know. But higher altitude is correlated with lower serotonin levels and increased dopamine levels. And it's theorizing, like, can this imbalance of these neurochemicals contribute to mood swings? Dopamine has been implemented in risk-taking behavior, which, look, these ski resort towns are already attracting so many risk takers, right? Who want to jump off cliffs, who want to do all these wild, crazy things. And perhaps the altitude is even exacerbating this problem worse. Or better, in certain ways. Maybe that actually engages people to try that next best, hardest trick, which I love and I think is one of the most beautiful, amazing sports in the world. But it also has negative influences as well. Perhaps it's contributing to this suicide.
Yeah, is it the chicken or the egg, right?
Right.
I guess that's a conversation that can go on for a long time. Thank you so much, Dr. Noone, for shedding light on this issue that we're facing in our communities. Guys, let us know what you think down below, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.